securely like check all the whole transaction history, right? So with unspent transaction output, you can also create some index, keep all of them on disk, quickly navigate only to check the transactions you want to check for the next block. So like if you have like 1 billion of transaction outputs, no problem, you will just check in your B3 or in some efficient index storage only those outputs that you need for the latest blocks that you received. So it's just a matter of like coding this up and keeping this somewhere on the disk, right?
Well, there's some extra factors to it. I want to give other people a chance to answer questions. We can talk about this after the session.
Yeah, I just want to show the idea that it's not as new and critical problem.
Right, but the blockchain size and the UTXO pool size are slightly separate issues, and the B-tree controls the block pool size, but it cannot control the UTXO size because all the UTXOs still have to live in the B-tree.
Yes. So yeah, I mean, you just for the next box you need to search only some subset of transactions, and the B-tree is quite efficient. So the only problem is about the hardware hard disk space. So,
Again, I don't want to argue about that.
Okay, thanks, guys. Yep.
So I'm a bit involved in the colored coins, and I noticed that you were talking a lot about colored coins, but that you actually talked about another fork or an alt chain. The idea of colored coins is separate of the chain, so it can be a Bitcoin or another alt chain. It's more about implementing something that's very client oriented and doesn't have any logic towards the chain itself. My question is whether you already looked into the implementations of this. So assuming there is like bits of proof, a colored coin, Bitcoin server, if you thought about the actual code, how do you code and implement rules about, of issuance? And if you looked at the technical part of this, and if it's possible to implement it even on the existing Bitcoin chain.
I think the idea of implementation, this whole idea on the existing blockchain, I mean, it's possible, it's doable, but you would have a lot more like limitations. Some things you wouldn't be able to do, like the whole rule system and the whole idea with divisibility of shares that is set by those who issue shares. So yeah, I mean, various possible routes that we can take to implement this idea. I can see them, but in my view, a fork would probably be a better route because it would be a lot more like flexible, and the most important part of the whole story is the rules, right? The rules thing.
My question is, where do you see are the rules a part of this new blockchain? Are the rules a part of the mining process? Are the rules a part of client? How does the decentralization of the rules work?
Yeah, as I said, those rules initially, classes of rules, they should be implemented by those who develop the software, and that is obviously each client should know about what kind of rules we may have. And then those who issue shares, they simply like set different values for those rules. So that would be my vision. Maybe some of you would come up with an even better way to do that. Yep.
I love the idea, and I just wanted to give you my 2 cents on something else you can do, another rule set that might add more value to it. And that is, I want to start off with the observation that the reason why public companies that are exchanged in the NASDAQ or whatever, why shares in those companies hold value is because the legal system around it enforces whatever rules there are, right? So, and that's tied to the US dollar. And so, consequently, if you want to add more value to your system, you should probably have a way to back units of stock with other units of stock, such as, well, imagine having a company, and let's say my company's name is Apple, and my company's really rich, I have a lot of Bitcoins, or some other unit of exchange. There should be a way for, I should be able to create a rule that says if you own my stock, you can redeem the underlying asset of my company, so you can.
Okay, so what you're saying is to have an hierarchical system of trust and reliability, and I think that is a great idea. So, for instance, you might have a very respected company, a big one, and then another company may emerge that would use a little bit of the reputation and backing of these parent company to start off, and so that people would trust this new company and buy its shares because they know that if this new company fails, at least they would get something out of the parent company.
Yeah, that's
a great idea.
Not necessarily hierarchical, it could be very.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it'd be nice to use the microphone.
Cheers. So the question that comes to mind for me is how this fits into the regulatory framework, right? Because you expressed concern with obeying local laws and regulations about this. Like in the US, it's extremely difficult to do things like take a company public. What occurs to me is that you could probably just shoehorn in the government as a sort of escrow party here. Issue of where all this data goes aside, whether it goes into the blockchain or a separate alt-chain or whatever, you could set it up and have the IRS or a bank or whoever act as the escrow party would issue these shares. I really like this system, and as somebody, I'm not sure this for the business owners in here, people don't like to obey the rules very often, and people will bend the rules. Your system is rather brilliant because it disallows people bending the rules. I don't even really know if that's a question, but I'm a big fan. I didn't realize what you were going to talk about here.
Okay, so I think the central idea I'm not a big fan of centralized legal systems, and I'm a big fan of the idea of poly-legal systems. And if you want to learn more about how that could possibly work, I would probably recommend the book by an economist. What was the son of Milton Friedman? David Friedman, that's right. And he writes in his book Machinery of Freedom, The Machinery of Freedom. He writes about poly-legal systems. And I think he has quite a great explanation of how that could possibly work. I think the more agents on the market you have that could possibly enforce the rules, the better it is, because people would have the opportunity to choose whatever rules they like, whatever companies that can enforce those rules that they like. So I think this is great. And if you just have, we could possibly have this transitional period in which government may act as an institution that enforces those rules. But I'm not really sure that government would be very fond of this idea anyway. So we might have to come up with our own solutions. I'm sorry. Oh, lawyers. Yeah, lawyers. I think they can. It doesn't, because lawyers, they basically right now they work in this in the monopoly, right? What they would have to do is to work for various legal systems, and maybe that would add some complications, which I'm not really sure of. You would have different rules, different laws, and that's fine. I think they could adjust. That is not a problem for lawyers, except maybe that some of them would lose their job because.
You're replacing lawyers with Python scripts.
Oh yeah, exactly. That is the whole idea, because some kind of rules now can be enforced automatically. Why do we need a lawyer to do that? Exactly.
Very small
A couple of comments. You mentioned you weren't sure if this was going to be something of interest to governments. I think there's a couple things you could do that might make it a little bit more interesting to folks that are thinking about it from that angle. The rule sets that you have, if you get with somebody who understands commodities or finance, you could probably map through a common set of properties that they deal in and come up with a rule set that mirrors something in the real world.
Yeah.
So you could say, this is the way IBM would be structured. This is the way Berkshire Hathaway would be structured. You could draw a couple of real-world examples like that and build what that rule set would be for that type of an organization. So you could start getting to people in their native language, businesses. The other thing that I thought is very interesting about this, if we're talking about putting this in a blockchain type structure,